and we appreciate the folks. We appreciate the folks that are joining us here today. This is a really, really important topic because I know of the people that we're working with around the country, even Puerto Rico, Guam. A lot of folks are saying, how do we get our products into the retail sector? And Theo Weaning and Warren Bidwell, I always want to call you Bidwell, have got a lot of experience in this area. Uh, Theo is having some difficulty logging on, so Warren will have to carry the bulk of it here until we can get Theo live. But you guys work closely enough, so Warren, I'm going to have you first of all introduce the two of you to the folks that are on this roundtable.
Yeah, sounds good. So Tia and I, we are partners in the Sustainable Meats Group. We're a sales marketing consulting firm that focuses on sustainably raised meat and seafood. Theo has a long career with Whole Foods, where he was the VP of meat. And I personally have been on the manufacturer side of the business, where I've worked for companies such as Anheuser-Busch, Smithfield Foods, Sara Lee, and some smaller meat producers such as Crystal Lake Farms and Teton Waters Ranch. But Theo and I started on our journey about a year and a half ago, really focused on helping smaller businesses get from farm to fork. There's a lot of challenges, as probably many of you know, getting from being a great producer of great proteins to getting them on the store shelves. And what we try to do is help those companies find their path and find their niche in the marketplace. So that's the really quick version of what we do, and that's who we are.
So Theo, are you with us now with audio?
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay. It's funny because Chris and Warren and myself are all traveling. So we're either in an Airbnb or a hotel room. You're only the guy that's in your office and you're the one that's having difficulty getting on. So anyway, Theo, give a little bit of your background. Warren mentioned briefly Whole Foods, but yeah, a little bit of your background.
Sure. Sorry about I'm on a little late. I mean, I know a lot about meat, but technology sometimes is a little challenging, So, but I grew up in the Netherlands. My dad had a butcher shop and did an apprenticeship program for 6 years. It covered everything: sausage making, slaughter, you name it. Came to America in 1990. Started working for Whole Foods in 1992. Was actually a really good timing. That's kind of like where the whole natural movement, organic movement kind of started. Worked with a lot of smaller companies, especially, I'm sure everybody is aware of Whole Foods and kind of like what they do and their standards. Worked with small companies that really kind of like had to meet those standards, and they all had their ups and downs, and we learned from each other, but was very rewarding. And some of these companies are quite large or ended up selling to bigger companies, and some companies, local companies, just stay small and local, whatever they kind of preferred. Worked a lot with the E-team on standards and processes, food safety, auditing, you name it. And then also with ranchers as well, kind of like really starting digging into trying to find better eating quality, genetics, feed and stuff. So left Whole Foods about 2 years ago, and then started working with Warren, and kind of going back to the old days, working with some of the smaller companies, and I'm pretty sure looking at the list that some of you guys really trying to figure out what's next, and would love to kind of give you guys all some feedback.
Great. Well, let's just jump in right there. You talked about, developing the standards and those things that are what we would call a point of difference. And I know as we've been talking with folks, we mentioned that if you're a smaller processor and you're just going to go produce a commodity product, that's going to be a tough sell. So, talk briefly about how important is it to have a point of difference in the marketplace.
You want me to take that one, Warren?
Yeah, why don't you start off there, Theo, and I'll add in some flavor for us.
Oh, sure enough. I mean, yeah, like you said, Dave, if you want to compete with a commodity and stuff, it all comes about price, and you can't compete with efficiencies from the big guys. So if you want to try to create a niche market, that's you got to try to figure out what you're good at. I mean, what you're doing, if you're a rancher, or if you're a poultry producer, if you want to make a sausage company or whatever, you try to find out a niche, kind of like, this is what I'm good at. And then it kind of build from there and see who else is in the marketplace. It kind of like, the nice thing about being in a niche market, what I always enjoyed, is kind of like you have like a set pricing, where in a commodity business it fluctuates up by demand and supply, and in some cases you can make good money, other cases you don't. But in a niche market, it's like consistent. And if you have a customer and you do your forecast, then you can also, plan on that and taking that to the bank and say, okay, based on my pricing, here's my cost. And this is kind of like the money I need to kind of like expand my business. So do your research. That's kind of like the biggest, suggestion I can give to you, kind of like who you want to be and which category you want to play in.
And to build on Theo's point, who you want to be, what we're saying is the consumer, continues to change, continues to evolve. What's most important to the consumer is what they're eating. Is it good for the planet? Is it good for the animal? Is it good for them? Is it good for their families? And finally, they're actually starting to say, is it good for the rancher? Is it good for the farmer? Those are the things that consumers are starting to gravitate towards. Now, there's that dynamic of price value trade-off, but at the end of the day, the consumers are starting to care more and more about the animal, the planet themselves, and also the rancher themselves. So where do you fit in that value equation is really, really important.
So, and just to stem off of that, I mean, so what are some of the ways that a producer or a processor can help the consumer make those connections? How can they tell that story?
Well, I think it's really important to understand where your brand fits in that consumer decision tree. I think that's from a category management. More and more retailers are leaning on data and category management. So where does your products fit in that decision tree? And so as a producer, I think it's really important to understand what are your strengths, what are your opportunities, and what are your challenges. You can't be all things to all people. And so identify your lane is what I would tell you is being focused is really critically important. And also understand, if you're going into the retail channel, not all retailers are the same. They all have different strategies. They all have different go-to-markets. They all have different consumers that they focus on. So really understanding where you fit in their problem, their solution to the consumer is really critically important. And Theo probably has a lot of really great insights based on his experience.
Yeah, I mean, Oren, you mentioned it. It's like you can't be everything. And some packaging I see now is like have like 5 different certified logos on it, and who do you want to be? I mean, you want to be focused on quality and pasture raised, or you want to be regenerative. But if you kind of like add, gluten free and no sugar, or you add a lot of this stuff to it, the customer gets confusing, and it kind of like it doesn't hit. So I think that's just like going back to my point, what you're good at and try to focus on that, and not trying to do too many items. So like in the past, we talked to, some folks, and they had like 15 different and 150 different SKUs. And it's like, like how can you manage that? From a profitability, it's not good. And also from a focus, it's not good either. But if you have 4 or 5 good items, or let's say you're a rancher and you have a specific breed, focus on the breed and kind of like what the animal eats, and be consistent. My dad always said, it's like, just be consistent. If you're bad, be always bad. Then people at least know you're bad, right? But, kind of like you want to be consistent. So you don't want a customer to buy something today. It's like, wow, this was the best piece of meat I ever had in my life. And then they come back next week and it's like, whoa, oh, that's no good. It's completely different. And then, you lose a customer. To make a sale, it's you can make a sale, but to keep the sale going, that's the most important part.
Great. Let me just ask this, if somebody's looking at getting into retail, what would you say are the most important steps, the most important factors of getting your product. You talked about that point of difference. I heard you mention forecasting, but yeah, expand on that a little bit if you can.
Sure, I can expand it. I can start it off. I mean, your forecasting is very, first of all, you want to decide what you want to be and have a market strategy, who you want to target, when you want to go after. And like I said earlier, I mean, in the past, I worked with companies, they just wanted to be local in their area, but they want to do a good job. But still, it takes a lot of forecast. The last thing you want to do is go to market. And I've seen it happen, especially there was a poultry company a couple of years ago, went to market and really spent lots of money on marketing dollars and stuff. And then, wow, people caught on to it. This is cool, right? And they picked up on it. And then they didn't have any chickens. They couldn't supply anything. I mean, from the get-go. And that's not good. For retailers, you know, they have so many tools right now that they know they have insights of out of stocks on a daily basis. And if you enter a market or a retailer, and then 2 weeks in a row or 3 weeks in a row, you don't have any product, you know, they'll know and they'll kick you out very quick because that real estate got to deliver money. And if you don't have the product to kind of supply, that's no good. But, you know, the market strategy, and then also make sure that, you know, when you end up going to market, that you can deliver, the distribution is set up, do your homework before you kind of like start it off. Don't just call a retailer, say, we got this product, you want to buy it, and then try to figure it out. Be completely prepared when you get in front of this buyer and have everything covered.
I agree with Theo. I mean, what I've seen in over my career is sometimes it's not necessarily the best brands or the best companies or the best products that win in the marketplace. It's those that retailers can rely on, that they know that you're there to service them day in and day out. That's critically important in this retail landscape because shelf space is money. Lost sales are critically important. And when you look at the consumer, they want to know when they go into a store, especially once they start investing in a brand, investing in a company, that they can count on that product being in the store every single day. The last thing a buyer wants is to get a call from a consumer saying, I buy brand X, Y, or Z in your store, and I've been in that store last 3 weeks and it hasn't been in the store. So reliability, consistency sometimes wins the game over a lot of other things.
Let me just remind folks, if you have some questions, just put them in the Q&A because we want to, you know, answer your questions as we go. We'll have a little bit more of the conversation, and then we'll, you know, open it up to the questions that you have for Theo or Oren. But let me just, you know, so if you're going to approach a retailer, you put some product into a Coleman cooler, and you go down there and knock on their door, or, you know, what are the steps if you're really going to make that first approach to a retailer?
Let's go. I'll let Theo start it off, and then I'll fill in with the color commentary on the other side of the desk.
First, you got them to answer your call. So, you know, that's the first step, and that's, you know, it's hard, and everybody is so busy to get in front of the buyer. It takes a lot, but you know, you got to have a little luck, and maybe you know somebody that already has a connection there to kind of get in front of the buyer. But again, like you don't want to go to the buyer and ask the buyer, say, so what do you want? What are you looking for? I mean, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, you got to come say, like, I've been in your stores. I saw this category, and my item is better, tastes better, better quality, and I can beat that pricing. That would be a good one. In some cases, you might not beat that pricing, but then you got to call out, okay, because I'm organic and my packaging is bigger than that other packaging. You got to have a line, because the buyer, the first question will say, why should I bring your product in while I already have a good beef company that I buy from, or I already have a good sausage category that kind of like good brands in there. Why do I need to bring you in and kick somebody else out? So you got to have all those answers ready when you kind of get in front of the buyer. And the one thing, the whole retail environment has changed a lot. If you get in front of the buyer, and going back to my point, you got to be completely prepared, because your product might not show up on the shelf 12 months from now. And so if the buyer has one question, you know, you might not be able to get an answer back from them 6 weeks or 8 weeks later because they're busy. And it's not like they do it on purpose. You know, they manage a lot of other items. So again, to my point, you got to be prepared and also kind of like know why is your product so much better than any of the other ones.
So to build on Theo's point, the selling cycle at retail has gotten very long. 6-12 months is pretty much standard. Depending on the size and the scale of the retailer, that selling cycle is a long time. So when you load up your Coleman cooler full of samples, know that this is your shot for the next 6 to 12 months, and you will only get one shot. So when you go into a retailer, what I would say is understand what their challenges are, understand what their categories challenges are, and understand how your products can be a solution to their challenges. And really be able to articulate it well on why you will help them solve a problem. Because as I said, this is your one shot. It's 6 or 12 months every year. And so be prepared, understand the competitive landscape, understand the consumer or the retailer challenges, and really help them and be a solution to their problems. And understanding those things will be critically important. What I would build on what Theo is saying is the worst thing you can do is go into a retailer and say, tell me what you want, because chances are they don't really know what they want. And if they did, they would have already fixed it. They would have already identified the brand, the product, or something to fix it. So the last thing you really need to do is lead with, tell me what you want. But realize you get one shot every 6 to 12 months anymore with most retailers. So be prepared.
But getting back a little bit to a question earlier, kind of like do your research, but also kind of like you got to target your retailer, the one where your product will fit. Or you've been in that retailer and you saw like, wow, they're really missing the boat. They don't have any organic beef, organic chicken, or any organic items. And, you know, they should at least carry a few of those items. Then kind of like really call that out, that you can kind of give them incremental sales, not like, okay, we got to swap somebody out. I mean, when I was a buyer and I said like incremental sales, that's the thing I wanted. I mean, I don't want to just swap out. That's a lot of work for me. You know, I got to do new planograms and stuff and I get the same amount of sales. But if I see like, okay, if I bring in organic, then I get a different customer, you know, that might go across the street and buy organic. So, you know, that gets me more sales. And then besides that, they might come in more often and buy non-organic items too, because they really don't want to go across the street again.
Great. Before we open it up to the Q&A, Chris, do you have some things that you'd like to ask Theo and Norton?
Yeah, no, great tips, and I've lived some of these recommendations, and you know, as I think back in time a little bit, when you make it to the meeting and you make it through your presentation, and that buyer says that they want your product in however many stores, one, you have to be ready to supply that. But Theo and Oren, can you talk about how our suppliers can understand maybe what those third-party inspection requirements might look like, or what these purchasing contracts, how can they be prepared for what they might see in a purchasing contract with some of these buyers and you know, groceries?
So if you asked me that question like 10 years ago, I mean, it was all over the board. It's now pretty standard. Like, you know, if you make a grass-fed claim, you know the retailer is going to ask for a document that proves there is a grass-fed claim. You know, you're gluten-free. You know, you got to have all that stuff. You got to have backup from any claim you make on your product. You got to have that. And then, you know, food safety. I mean, it improved a lot over the years, and every company will require some kind of, you know, food safety audit, and it takes time and stuff, but you know, as whoever you use as a processor or a co-packer, they should be familiar with it. But again, going back to me, do your research, be prepared, kind of like have all that documents ready that kind of like when they say, so when we're going to bring you in and you got to fill this onboarding package that you can turn it around in like, 24, 48 hours, you have everything together for them. That really shows like, wow, these guys really know their stuff. And if you try to start piecemealing it together, little bit here and then, a week later another piece comes out. I mean, it's pretty standard, that kind of like what they're looking for. And have all that stuff together, that kind of like, okay, your organic certificates. I mean, I know you're certified organic, but have your certificate ready. Have a whole file built up that you can kind of like, boom, here you go. You got everything.
Yeah, I would echo what Theo was saying. There is even with some of our clients, what we see in the very beginning stages is they really don't have all their ducks in a row. They say, I'm humanely raised. They have, they may have a third party certificate of what that means. They may have FSIS certificates and everything else, but they really don't have a turnkey onboarding packet, if you will, or turnkey onboarding information, because that's the key. Because as fast as you can turn that around, when you're dealing with these tight category review windows, the more likely you are to get a final yes, because the buyer will say yes, but then there's the whole onboarding process. And retailers have gotten more and more sophisticated with onboarding systems, whether it's Food Logic, if you're dealing with someone like Whole Foods, or there's a bunch of other, if you're dealing with Walmart, they have their own system. Downloading those documents in a timely fashion can enable success or contribute to your failure. So being prepared with those documents are critically important.
Yeah, I think it's really important, as Theo's already said, you must do your research and know what these retailers are looking for and what they're going to demand of you. And when we talk about third-party inspections, that's not just a USDA FSIS inspection. I know a lot of you are now, maybe in that phase of looking at what it's going to take to be an FSIS inspected facility, but you also need to be looking at, do you need humane handling certificates? Do you need SQF certifications, safe quality foods? Do you need, GAP certifications? What else do you need to be in the retail outlets that you want to be in? So, wherever you live, I know we have people on the call from coast to coast, east to west, and north to south. So wherever you live and whatever chain or retail outlet you're looking at, you need to make some phone calls and research what their requirements are. It's not just a USDA FSIS plant number and paperwork, and it's not just your humane handling certificates. Almost everyone requires that. But these larger chains, when we say third party, it's another company. It's an independent auditor that's coming in and making sure that you're maintaining quality and paperwork and documentation. And that's what gets into your consistency. They're going to grade your consistency in your products and your work procedures, your manuals. They're really going to scrutinize what you do and how you do it. And when you come in with these third-party certifications, that's what helps some of these retailers understand that, yeah, you're ready. You're ready. You've passed all these different audits and certifications. So we have more comfort in, at least inviting you to the table now.
You bet.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is you have a whole level of, I'll call it, retailer certifications now that they require. But then there's also the distributor certification. So don't get frustrated when you have a certain set of hoops that you have to jump through for the retailer. But, using the specialty and natural space, there's also those same hurdles that you're going to have to jump through for the UNFI of the world, the KHEs of the world, the super values of the world now that they're in that space a little bit, the CNSs of the world. So there is, there's a lot of merit in investing the time and the energy in getting your documentation process, your certification process, and all those things that accompany your products in line, because you're not going to just have to fill it out once for the retailer. You're going to have to do it for other people. And then also now, because we're now into somewhat of this digital age where e-commerce is so important and digital is so important, there's other third parties that are now being entered into the fray, such as OX1, which is a digital platform that takes all your product image information, puts it into and all your claims, and they put that into a format that the retailers can use for their websites. So there's a lot of paperwork now when it comes to getting your products on shelf and into retailers. So just understand that having all your ducks in a row is really, really, really important.
So we've got a couple of questions here. So Jennifer's is asks, can you talk a little bit about pricing strategy and what is a typical margin? What's the wholesale discount from retail pricing?
I'll kick it off. I always said to producers who came in and stuff, like, figure out your cost of production. What's your cost of goods, your real cost of goods? At the end of the day, you can do any formula, any crazy math and stuff, but at the end of the day, you got to make money. And if one of the pieces doesn't make money, the program is not going to work. So first of all, you figure out your cost of production. You should be doing that. And then, on average, the retail, it varies. Most cases, if I had to guess, and it depends on the category too. Usually you look at smoked, cooked, and cured and frozen. Margin targets for retails could be a little bit higher. But then in the beef category, to be competitive and draw customers in, it could be less, could be in the 20s. It varies. There's so many variables to it, and kind of like what the strategy is of the retailer. Promotions definitely will drive sales, especially when you look at poultry and pork. So when you put your pricing together, so you have your cost of goods, then you want to plan in and put some marketing dollars. But marketing dollars, I mean, first of all, market your product, but also for promotions. Promotions drive sales. You want people to try. That's the best way to get customers to buy the product. So make sure you calculate that into your pricing as well. Last thing you want to do is get into a retail and they said, okay, so every quarter we want to, knock off $2 and you got to knock off $1. And I was like, oh gosh, I didn't calculate for that. Your sales will triple. That could be a lot of money. So that's why you got to be really cautious. And again, to my point again, do your forecasting and do your planning. Kind of like, okay, if I do that, let's say I have so many animals available, I'm going to sell so many chucks, I'm going to put it on promo, I'm going to triple it, I got to discount it by 75 cents a pound, this is how much money. Really kind of like do your homework in it. And if you don't know, there's other people out there can probably help you that are really, good at that kind of like figure that formula out for you. But again, really do your homework before you kind of set your pricing. And the one thing when I see sometimes with retailers too is they try to figure out what the other guy is charging and trying to kind of, really kind of like, okay, the retail price is $7.99. The margin is probably 30% or 35%. So their cost got to be this much. And so I want to price it below that. I mean, if you start figuring that out, that's kind of like a wrong strategy. I mean, you might get lucky one time, but I think it's better to really kind of base it on real numbers. Kind of, this is my cost of goods, this is my marketing dollars, this is my distribution cost. And distribution costs can be expensive who you use. They can add something 15 to 20% to it, and that's a lot.
Well, and I was going to get into that. So if you have your product and you've got 15 to 20% distribution, and then let's just use Jennifer asked about frozen beef, but just fresh or frozen beef, going into retail, the margin difference between what a Kroger or a Whole Foods, what's sort of that range of the margin or the markup that they would have at the retail.
Yes.
You know, I would say it really does vary. I mean, it's to really kind of to tie into exactly what that is. I think Theo is right. You know, typically cooked frozen items at retail, frozen items can carry a pretty hefty margin on them. You know, cooked not so much, but still you're looking at 30s to 40s, you know, depending on the retailer you're looking at. But the real thing to understand is that retailers go to market strategy. What's their supply chain look like? So if you're going through a third party distributor versus you know, self-distributed channel or retailer, that's going to be a big difference. I mean, you know, KeHE, UNFI, you know, CNS, they charge a tremendous amount of money just right off the top. So you're looking at 8, 10, 15, 20%, depending on the product and the brand and the scale of the brand. And then you have the retailer who's going to tax that whatever they feel is necessary. I mean, but in all honesty, some retailers, if they feel like there's a segment in their category that they're losing market share on, they may compress their margins significantly. 10, 15, 20, break even. It all comes down to what's the net profit impact. So what's their markdowns look like? What's the margin look like? So what's the net maintained margin look like? So it's not a black and white. I know in the grocery channel and some of the, I'll say, shelf stable items, it's pretty black and white. It's 40%, 50%, whatever that number is. But when it comes to meat, because it's a perishable item, those margins can flex quite a bit, just in order to gain that consumer. Like Theo said, sometimes beef, they'll compress margins significantly. Poultry, maybe not so much. So it's really back to your product category and what's going on in the marketplace and what's that retailer's pricing strategy. So that's the other thing I would say is retailers now have very sophisticated models where they look at pricing strategy across proteins, and they're trying to get to a category protein target or category margin target. And so, you know, once again, how does your products fit into that solution is really kind of the thing to focus on.
Great. Pam down in Texas is she's asking a question that's a lot of our folks are involved with is, you know, cow-calf production. So here you have in a cow-calf production, you have your calving once or twice a year. You know, how can cow-calf producers, if they're looking at going forward into the marketplace and finishing their product, is there a way to go in with a seasonal product, or do you really need to have that consistent year round?
It depends. At Whole Foods, we came across, you know, depends on how big you are too. If you're small, yeah, you can do seasonal. I mean, there's seasonal programs, and you know, you can sell it on the internet, e-commerce. You know, you can plan that. But you know, you can't stop nature, right? So that's the big part. And I think, but for the big companies, you know, they really kind of like have a whole schedule with feeding and stuff, and from different parts of the country, and you know, year round, people eat beef year round, so they got to be beef year round. And I'm not an expert in on that side. I'm more on the retail side, but you know, I did get that question many times. It's like, well, your calf drops, and 18 months later, 22 months later, we got to harvest them, right? So it's like, and this is the time. But the other thing is too is like, you know, you have now with packaging techniques, you have extended fresh, so that really gives you a long shelf life too. So that's another way to kind of like, you know, extend your you know, production schedule over a longer time. You know, we know around Christmas times, I mean, you can sell any rib, any tenderloin you want, right? So really kind of like look at that as well. You know, summertime grinds are big and stuff, trying to utilize the whole animal. But everybody always asks me the question, but you know, if you're an expert in that field, I think you can figure it out.
Yeah, there's a few things I might add to that, Dave. You know, being a cow-calf producer myself, and working in this market for several years now, you know, when you're a cow-calf producer, a lot of times you're trying to compress your birthing times where you can market those animals all at one time and try to get the best price for the most consistent size of animal. But when you're in the retail beef market, as Theo and Orion have talked about, you want to have some consistent supply. And your customers, you know, if you're selling ribeye steaks in July and August, you know, where are they going to go after that? If you only have product one time of the year, you're going to lose that customer every year. So, you know, by having your compressed calving periods, you can have some natural growth periods where some cattle grow differently and finish differently than others. But having a consistent supply is very important when you're in the retail beef market, even if it's for your own store, if it's for your own online sales. You're going to spend a lot of effort getting that customer. And once you get them, you want to keep them. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every year to go try to take that customer back from somebody else. And Theo mentioned, you know, there's always somebody else trying to get your spot. So even if you do make it to the store, how do you stay in the store? And then once you gain that customer, how do you keep that customer? So you need to be thinking about that customer mindset, even that you all have. If you're that customer and somebody lured you away to their amazing product, and then you either made it differently a month later, or you stopped making it, or it's not available, what are you going to do? What are your buying habits? You have to think about that, and don't reinvent that wheel every year by having to go fight to get that customer back every year. Get them and keep them. That's very important.
Yeah, I mean, Chris has got great points there, because in the grocery business, and especially in food nowadays, it's all about trial and repeat. What you don't want to do is have great trial and not provide the opportunity for them to repeat. At the same time, what retailers are faced with more and more is they have less time and they don't have time to deal with complexity. So what you need to do is help them solve those problems, is create a customer base or consumer base that's driving trial and repeat. Because what we see, especially if you want to have a brand versus just a commodity, is you want to create trial and repeat. So once you build that consumer and attract that consumer, how do you retain that consumer 52 weeks a year? Because that's how you're going to build your brand, and in the end, your shareholder equity. You know, it's a brand drives shareholder equity. So without a brand and without building that equity, you're really just a commodity. So you're investing all this money. Yeah. You know, it's really incredible or really sad to kind of piss away that shareholder equity by letting that consumer go someplace else for 3 or 4 months out of the year, however long.
I know Theo mentioned this earlier, but used the word real estate, and I always like to say that it's kind of a misnomer that the retailers are in the food business. They're kind of in the real estate business, because you have to show, you know, they have to show that they're generating so much money per square foot in that store. And I like what you say, Oren, is that you've got to go to them with a solution. You're not just taking a product to them, but you're taking a solution to them. And I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris, out in California. Yep. Go ahead.
Yep. Real quick, just a little adding number there. So, like, when you think about Whole Foods, you know, probably some of the producers on this call would like to be in Whole Foods. Whole Foods has 42 SKUs in the hot dog and dinner sausage category. 42. That's it. So you're fighting for those 42 spots. And the buyer cannot be switching them out every 6 months for another 10 or 12. They make 2 SKU changes on average per year. So that's what you're fighting for.
Yeah. And knowing that timing is important. I always say, don't go pitch your product to a retailer in November or December. Yeah, they've got other things on their mind, maybe at that, you know. Chris out in California talks about, you know, what about using a broker? to access retail in ongoing? And then also, what advice do you have for contracts, including promo periods or other marketing fees?
Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take it?
You're the sales guy, man.
Okay. So first of all, I'll say broker, sales, marketing consultants. That's kind of what we do. We like to say we're not necessarily one of those people, but that is, I would say, a space. Not really pitching ourselves, but especially for a smaller producer, it's probably the way to go. As a smaller producer, you don't have the scale, you don't have the relationships to break through some of the barriers. I think a sales marketing consultant can help you situate your product, your brand, in a way that is perceived by the retailer to be market ready. So I think it's really good when you have sales and marketing consultants that can help you position your brands, that take away some of the barriers that and the hurdles that you're going to face. Some sales marketing consultant brokers are very transactional. I would say that in my experience, transactional, when I was a manufacturer, transactional brokers don't help I'll say sustainably raised meat and seafoods products, as well as maybe someone who's not as transactional. You have to have a really strong strategy. So that's kind of on the sales brokering side. I mean, I would say that if you're small, lean in to a sales and marketing broker. Pick the right one. Everyone kind of has their niche. There's big ones out there, there's small ones out there. I think finding the right partnership is probably the most important thing for a smaller producer, or for producers in general. Because some brokers don't really do a great job in protein. Some brokers do a great job in protein. So what is the product that you are trying to sell, and what are their specialties? I think it's really important. I think promotional planning, I think that's another part of the question there, is critically important, especially when you're not selling commodity meat, protein. Once again, as we're trying to create that year-round demand, trying to create and build a brand, I think having the right promotional strategy is very important. Let's face it, people will buy meat. And depending on what category you're in, for example, hot dogs, it's highly reliant on promotion. Certain categories aren't as reliant on promotion. So it really depends on the category you're in, but really having a good promotional strategy based on the needs of the category, the needs of your brand, is very important. Because let's face it, you can move a lot of pounds with promotion in the meat category. So it's really, and you can also spend a lot of money that's not needed in the meat category. So having the right promotional strategy is critically important. And what I would say is focus on the winning periods. So what periods of the year do you want to win? When you talk about grilling season, you want to win grilling season. Do you want to win tailgating season? Do you want to win, better for you, kind of January, back to routine, back to school? What are the key seasons that your products would play really well? And it's really important to understand where there's heavier consumption, how to drive heavier trial, and where you can gain a lot of trial and repeat is really important.
Just to add to the broker one, I mean, be cautious. I mean, going back to my earlier point, do your forecast and have your markets. How much product do you have to sell? I mean, if you have a broker out there and you don't have anything to sell, I mean, if he's selling you out, that's no good either. And the one thing from my experience when I was a buyer was when the owner shows up, the rancher, the pork producer, farmer, it makes a little bit of a different impact than a broker sitting in front of you trying to sell your program with a fancy PowerPoint or anything. I mean, that makes a little bit of difference too. So Yeah, brokers are definitely helpful, but you got to have product to sell. And going back to what's your market strategy? How big do you want to be? And if you want to be really big and hit like a Publix, yeah, you probably need a broker. But if you hit a few retailers and kind of want to grow from there, and seems like on the call there's a lot of startup companies. It's kind of like, you got to get started somewhere. You got to have some success stories. And that will help a broker too. If you have a success story, you go in somebody's like, well, so I went in there and the pork category grew by 15%. Like, well, that's good. So that's where that will get attention from a buyer. And it also will help a broker to kind of sell your program as well. So
So we have a couple of questions here that are along the same line, and this is really, really relevant to a lot of the folks that we're working with, because a lot of these small processors are also adding in or building in a retail storefront. And so one of the questions was, what are some of the things, if you're going to build your own retail space, what are some of the cautions? What are some of the things that you need to look for? And then another question is, so do you just do a butcher shop, or do you maybe add in some alcohol and beer or produce or other items? So I kind of combined two questions in one there. Yeah.
well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, that's a big one. I mean, it could go different directions. It depends on, going back to my point, where you want to be, who you want to be, and what are you good at. First, you want to do that and do your market research. I mean, if you start opening a butcher shop and you're adding some other stuff to it, and there's like 5 other butcher shops around there, then it's like, whoa, it's like, it's going to be a tough time, but you see there's a need for it and kind of build from there. And it's hard. So if you can sell some other items, that definitely will help with margin too, because, in general, meat, the margins aren't that high. So if you have a few categories in there, you can make a little extra. That's great. I mean, what I've seen lately a lot is that, companies will have a little sit down area where they sell a charcuterie board with some fancy, charcuterie and some cheeses with some wine. You want to attract different customers, and then they kind of pick it up. I mean, it's kind of like, it depends on the area you're in and kind of like what you want to try to target. But the sky is the limit. I think the one thing is probably should start small and then kind of build from there and kind of find out what the need is, instead of kind of guessing that, yeah, maybe we should do this and have, well, like I said, a restaurant, but there might be too many restaurants in that area that sell a meal with a drink for like $6.99, and your little meal is like, or your lunch meal is like $12.99. So again, it's kind of like, it varies kind of like where you at.
Did you say, Theo, that you grew up in your family butcher shop?
We did have a butcher shop, yeah, and we were just a butcher shop, and there were I lived in a town of that time about 3,500 people, and at one point there were 2 butcher shops and there were 2 retailers that had a butcher shop in it. So 4 places you can buy your meat. So you definitely got to be different.
Well, and one of the things that we found is that people that are putting in those little retail spaces is there are a lot of other folks in the community that are doing things like, jams or, stuff. So you can use your retail shop to be kind of the all things local too, which can give you a point of difference, a reason for people to come in. So I mentioned that we had Pam from Texas and Chris out in California. We'll go to Maine now, because I know Catherine has got a question, and she's asking about, what about going in with primals versus case ready. I think that's what you're getting at there, Catherine. But where do you see the trends going right now? What are they looking for?
Oh boy. I mean, you do have a lot of the e-commerce. I think that's like a huge market out there. Again, you got to be different, who you want to target and who you want to be. But I think do a little bit of everything. I mean, I think if you quarter beef, you can sell that, but do boxes. I mean, look at Butcher Box. I mean, Butcher Box is a $600 million company, and it's all about meat and have some salmon in there. But I think that's the way, you could do if you want to try it. But definitely as a producer, you want to utilize the whole carcass. So it could be a combination that you hook up with a small little restaurant chain that they serve your burgers on the menu and call out your name, and then it really, I mean, you can always sell a ribeye and a strip. That's not a problem. Trying to sell the other cuts is a little bit more difficult. And I think that the one thing you want to try to do is have outlets for some of these cuts that you know going to be tough, and be prepared early on doing that. Don't wait till you start harvesting more animals and all of a sudden you have 40,000 pounds of chuck sitting in your freezer. And it happens a lot, but you know, kind of like, okay, we have a guy that can do meatballs and another guy want hot dogs, and we have this food service chain that can do the pet. You want to start harvesting animals for the cost that you couldn't sell. So if you start to have to harvest animals for chuck, you're in a good spot. That's what my dad always said too when we made ground beef. He said, if I gotta buy trim for my ground beef, then we're good. And guess what? He always had to buy trim for ground beef. So
and maybe
Chris,
answering
I
the
see
question a
you-
little bit different than what Theo had said there is the way I think about you know, whether it's case ready or primals, you know, the farther you get away from the sheet, the smaller you can be, and the more value you can create. So what I see is, you know, more and more retailers are going away from primals. They want case ready, whatever it is. They're looking for they don't have store labor any longer. So how do you put your products in a position that they can sell best in a neat and orderly fashion very quickly? So when you think about most retailers, you know, kind of a primal program is really for that large scale producer, and really, you know, as you think about smaller producers, how do you get as far away from the sheet? Also, when you think about primals, you can't really advertise a lot of your product attributes as well as if you have it on the package. Now you don't want to be the NASCAR of you know, protein and have every label on your package, but if you have a lot of attributes on your product, you know, I would try to get it into a package and case ready as quickly as possible. That's where you're going to get the most value.
And
Chris, I noticed you nodding, and
yeah,
ahead.
a lot of history there, but you're going to have to be prepared when you're raising your own animals, butchering your own animals, and you do have to utilize that whole carcass, and everyone needs to be prepared to go outside your own little area to sell all of the animal. You know, wherever you live, you're going to have those niches, like, and like Theo said, we haven't found that cow that is made up of 100% steak yet. So, you know, you're going to have to sell all those products. So find an area where you can sell the oxtail and the tongue, you know, and some of the organs. You know, there are many cultures out there that use the non-typical products, or it might be non-typical to your community. So if you're selling chuck and steak in your area, look outside to the other areas to find where to sell that. Don't throw it away, and don't let it pile up until you get 4,000 of them in your freezer. You're losing money every time you let that inventory stack up.
Let me just add on to that's one of the areas where we're spending a lot of time here at Flower Hill, is helping folks with full carcass utilization, and including the edible offal, or the, you know, cultural items too. Because if you think about the communities where you as processors are at, you may have a strong Latino population that has, you know, certain taste preferences, or you have immigrant Muslims, you know, that are looking for the halal or different things. And so, you know, take a look at what the opportunities are in your local area. We have somebody that had a comment on the brokers that said, yeah, their experience, they're in the canned chili business, but you know, when they wanted to know that, well, were they established already in Walmart or Kroger or Myers? So yeah, finding a broker can be challenging. I know we're up to time here. Two things is that not only will we have this archived on our site in our toolkit, but following this webinar, Warren and Theo agreed to work with us. We're going to put together an FAQ document of, you know, common questions for processors that getting there into retail. So we'll have that. So Theo and Oren, I'll let you guys have the last word as we wrap up here.
All right, if I can say one thing, is like, do your planning, forecasting, and put a market strategy together before you kind of like start spending a lot of money, and stick with what you're good at.
And I agree with Theo, is understanding what your strengths are, understanding what your weaknesses are. Just because you have weaknesses doesn't mean that's a bad thing. Just really focus on what you're good at, and really go to the retailer with a solution approach. Because if you are doing that, I think you'll find a place to win.
Yep.
Dave, I might add, I know there were several questions that were sent in, some ahead of time and some on the chat we didn't get to. Please email us your question. If you're not already in our technical assistance network, go to flowerhill.institute, send in a technical assistance inquiry. Dave and I get all of those, so we will read your question and we will send you an answer. And I know last minute there was a question about hides. Dave and I are putting together a hide and composting webinar. It's going to be about a month from now or so. I think it's maybe first part of April. We'll get that
We
date
got
out.
two of them. We've got one that's going to be for hides and one that's going to be focused in on composting. So,
Yeah.
Rajiv, yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, we're gonna have some answers for you on that, but those are tough subjects, and we have tackled them. Dave and I have been doing a lot of research on those, and have some other folks from other industries that we're going to bring on and have some roundtable discussions just like this. So stay tuned with us, and we'll get that out to you.
Yep. And I just want to thank Theo and Oren. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. I know I've known Theo for many years, just got a chance to meet Oren and recently, but really respect your knowledge and what you bring to us and your willingness to work with us to help these smaller processors get into the marketplace. So thank you so much. And as Chris said, we will be sending out information on the upcoming webinars on hides and composting. So thanks everybody for being with us today.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.